Let's talk about immunity. Pathogen is a bacteria, fungus, virus, or protozoan that can cause disease. The best way to keep out pathogens is to not allow them into the body. So that includes our first line of defense, like our skin, which has layers of dead cells, oil, and sweat. Our digestive system has stomach acid and enzymes. Our gas exchange system or respiratory system includes hair, cilia, mucus, coughing, and sneezing. All of those help to either trap pathogens or get them out of the system. And the urinary system has mucus and periodic flow of urine to wash out pathogens. Once the pathogen has entered the body, then we have non-barrier responses. So responses that involved are on the inside of the body. Inflammation is one of our first defenses. A bunch of white blood cells converge on the pathogen and cause inflammation in the area. Second is antibody production. If that initial non-barrier response did not work, then our body has to make antibodies against the antigen. For the inflammatory response, when a microbe penetrates the body's first line of defense, it triggers a series of changes leading to inflammation. So here we see the antigen enters the body, there's bacteria. White blood cells squeeze out of capillaries and engulf the bacteria by phagocytosis, and then enzymes in the lysosomes of the white blood cell kill or digest the bacteria, and it may result in pus formation. Here we see a close-up of the capillary. During an injury, the capillary widens, which increases the permeability, allowing blood cells to squeeze through the white blood cells, and then they can go engulf the bacteria and kill it. The immune response is triggered when the inflammatory response fails. Antigens are markers on the surface of all cells, viruses, bacteria, body cells that help to identify the type of cell. Antibodies are Y-shaped proteins produced by the blood cells due to exposure to an antigen. So when an antigen enters our body makes an antibody that fits that specific antigen. When foreign antigen enters the body, it causes lymphocytes, a group of white blood cells, to make antibodies. The shape of the antibody is determined by the foreign antigens. Therefore, antibodies are antigen specific. So if a bacteria enters your body, then you have a specific antibody for that. If it's a virus, it would be a different antibody. When an antibody attaches to a foreign antigen, it destroys the cell attached to it. Antibodies cause several antigens to clump together, making it easier for macrophages, another type of white blood cell, to capture them. Steps in the immune response. First, an antigen enters the body. So these are representing an antigen. Second, the macrophage engulfs the antigen by phagocytosis and pushes the antigen marker to its outer surface. Next, the helper T cells identify the antigen and direct B cells and killer T cells. Helper T cells tell B cells to make antibodies, which they do. Next, the antibodies attach to the antigens. So here are the antibodies attached to single antigens floating in the plasma or antigens that are sticking out of macrophages. Then more macrophages can come along and eat the entire antigen antibody complex, or killer T cells puncture the membrane of bacteria, causing bacterial death. Next, the suppressor T cells stop the response because the white blood cells have done their job. They are not needed anymore. And finally, memory T cells remember the antigen so that they can tell B cells to produce antibodies faster next time. So reviewing the functions of white blood cells. Macrophage engulfs the antigen and pushes the antigen marker to the outer surface. Helper T cells copy the antigen shape. Killer T cells puncture the membrane of bacteria. B cells make antibodies. Memory T cells remember the antigen so that antibodies are produced faster next time. Suppressor T cells stop the response. Why can't our immune system destroy HIV, or the human immunodeficiency virus? Usually, viruses leave their outer protein coat in the entry port on cells, so they're leaving an antigen. This way, it's recognized by the body's lymphatic system, and it is phagocytosed. However, HIV does not leave its protein coat on the cell, and it invades helper T cells. Helper T cells mistake the virus for a needed substance and phagocytose it, allowing the virus to enter the white blood cell. Helper T cells activates both killer T cells as well as B cells. HIV can live in T cells for days or even years without becoming active. When it does become active, it uses the helper T cell's DNA to reproduce. When the helper T cell bursts, HIV spreads to other T cells. So here we have HIV entering a helper T cell. It uses the helper T cell's DNA to make many more copies of itself, and then these copies are released into plasma, which then can invade other helper T cells. HIV progressively damages the immune system, destroying the body's own defenses, so it's an immunodeficiency. This makes AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, patients prone to many infections and disorders. And that's why you should cover your mouth when you cough. This is the summer we rafted down the bronchial tubes. Then the white blood cells chased us and you got lost in the colon. Remember that, Gerald? Viral home videos. Vaccines are dead or weakened virus injected into the body. The body produces antibodies to prevent further infections. It was first successfully done by Edward Jenner. Vaccines contain destroyed antigens that trigger antibody production. So a person makes antibodies against the disease without becoming sick from the disease. The reason that a person would need more than one vaccination for the same disease is the first time the primary immune response is slow to build and not very strong. Some memory cells remain, and then when a second vaccine is given, the secondary response is stronger and more rapid than the primary response, and the result is that more memory cells remain, so if they were to come into contact with the disease, their antibody response would be even greater than that secondary response, and they would not get sick. Antibiotic is a drug made from bacteria or fungi. It's used to only kill diseases caused by bacteria. Danger of antibiotic overuse. Over time, bacteria can become antibiotic resistant, which means they're no longer killed by that same antibiotic. Antibiotics cannot cure viruses, which means if you have a cold or a flu, an antibiotic will not help because those are viruses. Antibiotics can cause serious side effects like allergic reactions. For more information, watch the Crash Course Immune System Part 1.